The celebration in the city square was coming to an end. Food stalls were selling their last portions, musicians were packing up their equipment, the shooting range had closed, and finally the line for face painting had cleared. Sarah and Megan were leisurely walking past the petting zoo. "Nothing interesting," Sarah said, enjoying her enormous ice cream cone, and it ended so quickly. "Summer will fly by like this and we won't even get to relax." "Yeah," Megan agreed, tucking a blue strand of hair behind her ear. "Way too few attractions for such a big crowd." The girls were about to head home when Sarah nudged her friend. "Look, what's that? We've been everywhere, but that tent wasn't there before." Megan squinted. Indeed, a bit off to the side, away from the rest of the commotion, was a black and red tent. There was light inside, and above it was a sign. Just a piece of plywood painted with bright neon colours. It read, "Museum of Fear," in hand-painted letters. Without a word, the friends headed toward it. A man in a red velvet jacket stepped out of the tent. "Hello, ladies. Our Museum of Fear is still open. Come on in. I have plenty to scare you with," the man smiled, his eyes glinting as he looked at them expectantly. "What's in there?" Sarah asked. "Labyrinths, creepy creatures, lost souls, and lots of ghosts. Each of them has their own story. If you ask, they'll tell you." The friends exchanged glances. "All right, let me just finish my ice cream," Sarah said, nodding toward the cone with the last bits of the sweet treat. "You can take it in." "There are no rules here," the man said, folding his hands and looking at Megan. Megan rolled her eyes. She was used to the older generation disapproving of her appearance. The blue hair, piercings and bright makeup bothered them. Even in the dim evening light, standing outside the run-down Museum of Fear, Megan caught that look. "What a charming look you have," the man suddenly smiled. "If you can surprise, capture minds and thoughts, life is much more interesting, right? Come in, payment is on the way out." The girls went inside, and the man in the velvet jacket stayed outside, closing the tent flaps behind them. The dirty yellow light inside gave the place a peculiar atmosphere. The friends looked around and moved forward. Inside, the Museum of Fear looked rather amusing. Doors lined the sides of a narrow hallway that spiraled inward from the entrance to the center. Each door had a sign with inscriptions like "The Runaway Bride," "Mother," and "The Black Void." There were more doors further along, but the girls stopped. "Let's go." Sarah tugged her friend toward the bride's room, taking a bite of her ice cream. "Throw that away already." "No, I love pistachio ice cream." The girls entered the room. A dim light bulb in the corner was the only source of illumination. At first it seemed like there was no one in the room, and... Megan clicked her tongue impatiently. "Are you here for me?" A voice came from behind them. Sarah jumped in surprise, her ice cream splattering onto her shirt in a sticky mess. I can't go out. I don't want to marry him." A woman in a white dress stood behind them. The dress was tattered and dirty. What used to be beautiful makeup was now smeared, turning her face into a colourful palette. Mascara had run, leaving dark circles around her eyes. "Why are you looking at me like that? Who are you? Please don't make me marry him." The woman suddenly started crying, curling up in the corner. The friends cautiously began to move toward the exit. Then Megan stopped. "They said you'd tell your story. Aren't you the ghost bride?" Megan smirked, deciding that this Museum of Fear was their last chance to have some fun tonight. The bride went silent. She stood up and approached the friends. Suddenly, the dim light bulb grew brighter, just enough to reveal that the bride was translucent. They could see the wall behind her, covered in scratches, as if someone had been clawing at it for a long time. The bride reached out her hand towards Sarah's hair. "Look at you, covered in ice cream. I was supposed to have a wedding, a lavish one, the best, so many attractions and entertainment for the guests. Who could have known it would all turn out this way? I had to run, to hide. Luckily, I found somewhere to go. Soon the guests will leave and I'll come out." Sarah stared in a stupor at the translucent woman, while Megan looked at her nails. Broken, nearly ripped off, as if she had been clawing at something for a long time. "Let's go! Let's go!" Sarah finally grabbed her friend and pulled her out of the room. They caught their breath in the hallway. Was that a hologram? Megan was the first to recover. I mean, probably. It can't be a real ghost. Maybe we should just leave. Look at me, I'm all messy. My hair, my shirt, fine. But that guy in the velvet said payment is at the exit. Megan gathered her blue hair into a ponytail. So if we have to go that way, we might as well check out a couple more rooms. Sarah shrugged. The friends continued on. "Here's the mother room. Want to go in?" "Oh no, I've got a mother at home. Can we do without parents at least here?" They stopped in front of the door labelled The Black Void. Megan boldly opened it. There was no light inside, just complete darkness. "Yes, this is a real museum of fear." Sarah hesitated at the threshold while Megan pushed her friend inside and closed the door behind them. The girls stood still, holding hands, and Sarah kept her hand on the door handle. They waited a few minutes for something to happen. "Nothing's happening. Let's at least walk around the room. Maybe we'll find something interesting," Megan said, moving forward and letting go of Sarah's hand. "Meg, wait, it's so dark in here. What if we get lost?" But Megan stretched her hands out in front of her and took 3 big steps. She thought she would run into a wall, but there were no obstacles. Another step, 3 more. "Is this room endless? Are there no walls?" Megan called out. She sped up a little, then started running. It seemed impossible. The tent wasn't that big. Megan had definitely walked about 30 feet, maybe more. "Sarah, yeah, what is it? Nothing, just darkness and emptiness. This room has no end. I'm coming back." Megan turned carefully so as not to lose her bearings and began walking back. "Sarah!" she called, figuring she'd covered half the distance and her friend should be directly across from her. "I'm here!" Sarah's voice came from the left. Megan froze. Strange. "Oh well, where are you?" She took a couple of small steps to the left. "I'm here!" Sarah's voice was still coming from the left. "I'm lost!" Megan panicked, breathing heavily and trembling. "I don't know where to go." "Meg, use your phone's flashlight." Sarah, leaning against the door, rummaged through her bag for her own phone. "Sarah, my phone isn't working. I think the battery's dead." Megan's voice shook. "Mine's dead too," Sarah whispered in surprise, flinging the door open. "Just head toward the light from the hallway. I can't see the light. It's pitch black." "Sarah! Sarah!" Megan turned her head in all directions. "Meg, stay right where you are. I'm going to get that guy in the velvet jacket. The door is open if you need it." Sarah rushed back to the entrance of the Museum of Fear. She threw open the tent flaps and ran into a door. "Hey!" she yelled, jerking the handle. "Open up! My friend is stuck in the black room. Turn the light on in there. Do you hear me? The exit is at the end of the hallway. Payment is there as well," the man's distant voice echoed. "Do you hear me? Turn the light on in the black room. Megan can't get out," Sarah screamed desperately. "The exit is at the end of the hallway. Payment is there," the attendant repeated. "Open up! Hey!" Sarah shouted. No answer. She ran back into the corridor. She tried to act quickly and confidently, but very troubling thoughts were catching up with her. Sarah reached the door labelled The Black Void, which should have been open, should have been. She pulled the handle and screamed, "Megan, are you in there? Hello, God! Meg, where are you?" There was no response. Sarah burst into tears, not knowing what to do. Her ice cream-stained hair had become a tangled mess. Her dirty shirt stuck unpleasantly to her body, and tears smeared the last traces of pistachio ice cream across her face. Sarah suddenly went quiet. Of course she should head to the exit. Megan was probably already there. Someone had gotten her out, the velvet guy or his assistants. This was just an attraction, after all, a playful museum of fear with holograms and a treadmill in the dark room. Sarah walked down the winding corridor without looking at the rooms. It seemed endless, each new turn revealing another twist. Finally, Sarah reached the center. It could have taken her 10 minutes or an hour. There was the door, and it read, "Exit." She pulled the handle. Behind it was a small room with some sort of cart, the kind usually used to sell hot dogs. At first, Sarah thought it was a storeroom, maybe a way out to the street, but she was wrong. Solid walls, a dim light, and the cart. She turned to face the door. Above it was a sign with bright neon letters, "No exit." Sarah's hands went cold. Her mouth went dry, and she found it hard to breathe. She stood there for what felt like several minutes, maybe an hour, before she left the room. She walked down the corridor, crying without looking at the signs. "Megan!" Sarah suddenly screamed. "Where are you? Where?" Tears streamed down her dirty cheeks, obscuring the inscriptions on the doors. She wiped her face with her hands and saw the next sign. "Blue hair," she read aloud, immediately picturing someone with blue hair. Panic squeezed her chest so tightly that Sarah couldn't breathe. With a trembling hand she opened the door. Megan stood silently in the black room, waiting for Sarah to return with help. She was terrified. The Museum of Fear was too realistic. She was scared. She was panicking. She needed a way out, urgently. In the distance, she could hear Sarah's frantic shouts. How was this possible? Sarah had left the door open. The light, though dim, should have been visible, but it wasn't. Suddenly, Megan heard the sound of a door closing. The screams fell silent. "Who's there? Hey!" Megan finally gave in to her tears. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Suddenly, a wind picked up in the room, a real gust, enough to knock her over. Megan crouched on the floor. Her hair tie slipped off, disappearing into the black void, and her hair whipped painfully at her face. She huddled closer to the floor, her hands feeling the rough plywood beneath her. Then she felt a comb, a regular comb. As soon as she grabbed it, the wind stopped. The light came on. Megan looked around, clutching the comb in her hand. In front of her was a giant mirror that stretched across the entire wall. On either side and behind her were solid walls. She looked at her reflection. Her hair was a mess, like a bird's nest. Without even realizing what she was doing, Megan began to comb her hair. Her mind went blank. It felt like the only goal she had was to fix her hair. Sarah entered the door labelled "Blue Hair" and gasped. In front of her was a transparent wall that took up the entire space. Right behind it sat Megan, combing her hair methodically, staring straight at Sarah. "Meg! Meg!" Sarah pounded her fists on the glass. It was thick. Even her hardest blows couldn't make it vibrate. But Sarah kept hitting it, shouting, watching her friend comb her hair in desperation. "An empty stare just because you're looking in the mirror, right? You can't see me. You see yourself," Sarah cried, sliding down to the floor. Sarah felt like she sat at that glass wall for hours, maybe the entire night. The Museum of Fear was terrifyingly silent, an oppressive, heavy silence, like a granite slab. Finally, she stood up and walked down the corridor toward the center, to the room with the exit sign. With her eyes on the ground, she opened the door and walked in. The cart hummed as if plugged into an outlet, although there were no visible cords. Sarah approached it and looked inside. No hot dogs. "It's ice cream. Pistachio. I love it," she said resignedly, digging her hand into the large container. Covered in more mess and feeling sick from overeating, Sarah turned around. The door closed on its own, but she no longer cared. She turned back to the cart. At least the ice cream never runs out. How terrible that there's no way out. The light in the corridor flickered a few times and went out. If anyone had been standing there, they might have noticed the sign's text change. The word exit was gone, replaced by a bright neon sign that read ice cream vendor. The fair's celebration was winding down, and the slightly chilled people were hurrying home. At the far edge of the square stood the red and black tent with the Museum of Fear sign. The attendant in the velvet jacket rubbed his hands together. He was ready to pack up too when he saw a group of teenagers in the distance. Laughing and pushing each other, they approached. "Welcome to the Museum of Fear. My new exhibits are waiting for visitors." "The ice cream vendor and blue hair will scare you to death," the man said, his eyes gleaming as he pulled aside the tent flaps. The teens hesitated. "What's inside?" one of the boys asked. "Horrors from all over the world, not just this one. The scariest places, creatures, and of course many ghosts. It's hard to believe, but I have over 1,000 exhibits in my museum. They're so realistic that you might not believe your eyes. Want to take a look? And where did you get such a collection?" "I travel a lot. I've seen many things. I decided to combine business with pleasure and opened my Museum of Fear. Why let all that horror go to waste in the backwoods of the world? Let it stay here, under my watch." "You mean you've really been to the backwoods of the world?" The boy seemed scared to go inside. "Of course, and you can meet interesting characters in everyday life too," the man said, his eyes gleaming again, "like you, for instance." "Nah, we're not interested, mister. That's for kids." The boy turned away first, followed by the others. The attendant frowned and stomped his foot. The boy suddenly stumbled and fell on the flat ground. The attendant shrugged and went back into the tent. "The modern generation is hard to impress," he said to himself. "Well, I've got 1,000,000 lives ahead of me. I'll be able to add to my collection. After all, there are so many interesting characters in the world. Let them stay here, under my watch." He stomped his foot. If anyone had been watching the Museum of Fear from the outside, they still wouldn't have seen the tent vanish. It simply disappeared, leaving behind a faint grey mist and the smell of sulphur. Please write in the comments, support the video with a like, and of course subscribe to the channel. If it's not difficult for you, I will be pleased. You can also share this video with your friends. They will probably also be interested.